Good morning, friends, or good afternoon, wherever you are. We are happy to have you on this webinar sponsored by TENS, the Episcopal Network for Stewardship. We've got folks today from all over North America, from Seattle, from the Diocese of Olympia, down to the Diocese of Southeast Florida, up into Ontario, Canada, and Maine, and way down in San Diego. So we've got all the corners covered, and it's really lovely to have folks from all over participating in today's webinar. TENS runs several webinars a year, and I hope that you're either already on our mailing list and getting our monthly newsletter, where you can learn about options and hear from you. So thank you for that. I'd like us to get rolling here, and I'm going to share our screen and keep going. What we're talking about today is how to attract and retain younger members. We're going to go over a few characteristics of what identify our various generations, and then we're going to focus on our youngest two generations, the Millennials and the Gen Z folks. So, excuse me, I've got a little cough, so I'll try not to interrupt too much by that. But we're going to talk about the very different generations that we have active right now in the church. Then we're going to talk a little bit about what we know and what we need to know about younger generations and their interaction with church. And finally, we're going to talk a little bit about what to do and what not to do when it comes to liturgies and pledges and ways that giving and ways of interacting with your church. I want to start with a little celebration. The fact that through modern medicine and through great caretaking, we have the widest array of generations active and participating in church that we've ever had, as far as we know in the history of keeping records of such things. We've got 5 active generations that go from our Gen Z up to our mature or our greatest generation folks. This is a really important thing because it tells us that we're not monolithic. We have a lot of diversity in terms of age in our churches. And so having a one-size-fits-all approach to how we interact with different folks, how we present our fundraising case, how we present our mission and ministry might not work. So we might need to be aware of how different generations respond to our message so that we're able to reach them in the ways that they want to be reached. I'm going to be sharing some very general statistics that come from a combination of the Giving USA 2023 report and from the Lilly School of Philanthropy Lake Institute of Faith and Giving report that was done in 2023 about generational differences in giving. So we're going to, but these are broad categories and broad statistics. So we'll go into detail about some of them. And if you have questions, please ask, but also know that these are aggregate average statistics. So they may not look like your congregation, but they look like America or North America as a whole. Let's start with our oldest generation. We call them the matures or the greatest generation. This also encompasses what you might know as the silent generation. These are folks born before 1945. Many of them who go to church donate to their church. They're living on retirement assets by now in almost all cases. And so they might not give as much as they used to, although they might have kept their giving trend right where they always had. And so they're giving very generous gifts, but they do donate to church. It's very important to them. They're still volunteering as well. We know that when we put out a call for volunteers, it's very often folks from this generation who are ready to show up and roll up their sleeves and do things in the church. They are well steeped in that tradition of answering the call. Folks in this generation in general are most interested in supporting the institution because it's the institution. They want church to be there for their grandchildren as it was for them. They trust institution in general, and we're going to see that trust level change as we move through generations. But this generation in general has a great deal of trust for institution. And so when the church asks, they respond. And this is an important relationship to keep in mind. They are the best at pastoral care and also in need of pastoral care. As we talk about perhaps isolation that some of our senior members feel, we need to reach out to them, but they also have great wisdom and great skills in reaching out to each other and taking care of people. And so having these folks as a part of your pastoral care team, having these folks on, being able to reach out to members. They often organize, the potlucks or the meal trains when someone is sick or something like that. This generation knows how to take care of each other, and we can learn a lot from them. If you haven't asked folks in this generation for a planned gift, an estate or a legacy gift, now is absolutely the time to do it. They are probably sitting on extraordinary appreciated assets in their home or in their retirement portfolios. They might be able to designate a percentage of that to the church to keep their pledge going in perpetuity. We want to make certain that these folks have a chance to make a planned gift, because other places are asking, their schools, their favorite charities, and if they're in a care home or an assisted living facility, likely those facilities are asking them to make planned gifts, and they have great access to them and to their money. So we want to make certain that our churches don't lose the opportunity to help these folks make a lasting legacy to the church that has nurtured them and in which they've raised their families, and they want to make certain that it's there for future generations. Folks in our mature group also are great at making capital gifts. They want to see the church building succeed. They want to take care of maintenance if they can. They want to, and they often have appreciated assets to give to such a thing, stock gifts or other things that they can make generous gifts to capital campaigns or capital improvements for your church. Their annual giving, probably still making it, but as I said earlier, they're coming from retirement assets, and so they might be finite. They might be living on a fixed income. They might be giving directly from their retirement accounts through qualified charitable deductions or required minimum distributions. Know how to accept those gifts from this member. Moving through to our baby boomers, the next generation younger. Born between 46 and 64. I know these are fluid numbers. Different sociologists name them differently, but for our purposes, we're going to take these numbers. So they're less in church than their parents and grandparents were, but those who are still a part of church are giving. Now, notice that we've had a big drop off in the percentage of baby boomers who are making gifts to their church, from almost 60% at the matures down to less than 50% of baby boomers who attend church are donating to church. There's some questions to ask there about where they're at with their relationship and their assets, what they're doing and how they're preparing for the next stages of their lives. But certainly they are still active and important givers in our church. They're also great volunteers. This generation started to see some chinks in the armor of trust in our society. And so they might want to ask some questions before they know how to make their gift. They might want to scrutinize your budget or ask questions at the annual meeting about how money is raised and how it's spent. Make certain that you have questions and answers for them. They are interested in the church being there for their children or their grandchildren. They might have seen their children not come to church, and now their grandchildren are coming. And so they might be missing a generation there, and they're concerned about that. So knowing how to work with them and how to help them through that. And again, these folks, great for planned giving. So if you haven't asked them for planned gifts and legacy gifts, now is the time. We want to do this when people are feeling comfortable with where they're at before they start to panic about where their money and where their things and where their lives will go. So this is a great time to make planned giving approaches, capital campaigns, and they might just be moving into retirement or living in retirement. They might still be earning an income. Their annual giving should be steady. But note, it might start to drop off as they move into retirement assets or as those retirement assets get spoken for in different ways. Finally, it's of great note that this generation is the wealthiest generation that we know of ever to have lived. They've amassed a fortune in personal wealth, in appreciated assets, and those assets have to go somewhere when these folks are no longer living. And so it's just important to note that this is a very, very wealthy generation in general. Folks who are my age will identify with the Gen X. These are folks born from 65 to 76. And we are the lost generation, the small generation, the forgotten ones. But we're right in the middle of our careers. We're right at our best earning potential in the job market. We're starting to think about retirement. We have a lot that our churches need from us, and we're asking a lot of questions. Now, there aren't many of us in church. We understand that. We're a small generation to begin with, and a lot of us latchkey kids didn't go to church or weren't sent to church for Sunday school when we were kids. There was that generational sort of absence in a lot of us. But for those of us who stuck around, we are giving to church in higher percentage than our boomer parents. So 56% of us on average are making donations. And they should be great donations because we're at our highest earning in the job market right now. We also will show up and we will volunteer. A lot of loss of trust for institution, though. Our Gen X folks have seen not just government scandals, but they've seen corporate scandals and stock market bubbles bursting, and perhaps had their fortunes wiped out and rebuilt again in the stock market. Their 401ks are in constant flux. This generation feels some ways about who controls their money and what. And so there are some questions that they might want to ask about church, and make certain that we are very transparent and accountable with them about how we talk about our finances and our budgets. This generation, and we're going to keep seeing it as we get younger, volunteerism is really important. So showing up, moving tables, participating in Saturday activities or other things. This generation knows how to get things done, and they're well connected, and a lot of them are now empty nesters and have time and to give back to the church in ways that when they were raising their families, they didn't. So these are great folks to ask to volunteer to do things or lead ministries. They have great skills from their jobs and their education that they've learned. Ask them to lead ministries in your congregation or develop them. Annual and capital giving are prime for this. They might be ready to start thinking about planned gifts, but certainly we should be expecting them to contribute when the church needs a capital gift and for that general operating revenue. This generation and the millennials behind them, depending on how old their parents are, will be inheriting $40 trillion in the next 15 years. This is an enormous transfer of wealth that's going to happen from one generation to another. And not all of that money is going to go to people. It's going to go to institutions as well, because nonprofits in the last 2 decades have become very savvy about asking for planned gifts and other things from and other ways of giving from our baby boomers and our greatest generation folks. So this generation stands to inherit a lot. How we form them, how we make certain that they know how their money impacts the mission and how it serves the world is really important, because these folks are about to get a whole lot of assets dropped in their lap. They might be prepared for that. They might not be prepared for that. So it's a role of church to help them prepare. That's not to say we should get involved in their personal finances, but we should know what's going on with them, and we should have some pastoral and some actual answers to help them make good decisions with their money and where it's going. Our millennials, our next group born between 77 and 95. So we're going to start seeing the number of volunteers rise while the number of donors stay steady or right around that 50% level. The younger we get, the more volunteerism is happening in church. And this is because our millennials are very interested in results. They want to see, what is the church doing in the community and how can I participate in it? They are likely to show up on a Saturday before they're likely to show up on a Sunday. They might come to your outreach, to your food pantry, to your tutoring program, and say, how can I connect with a community organization that's doing something for my neighborhood? And then they'll start coming to church. This generation is really concerned about the world and how to improve it. They've been raised with this understanding that the world is a messed up place and that they have some skills to be able to fix it. That said, they have very little trust for institution. They're carrying high debt from educational institutions. The government hasn't done much for them yet, and they're feeling the pinch on all sides. And so church might not be a place that feels good for them yet, because it feels like yet another institution. This is why the church has something to prove to millennials, that we are doing the work, that we are places where they can be respected, where they can really plug in and make a difference. The churches that we hear about and see on TV that are like growing with this generation are the ones that make them feel comfortable and welcome when they come in, and the ones that are doing things with their other days of their week where they can feel that they can plug in and raise their families. So our churches need to start thinking about volunteerism and how we recruit and think about these generations. We're going to go in much more detail about this in a few minutes. This generation is incredibly generous. 89% of them donate to nonprofits already. They might not be at their highest earning potential in jobs, and they are carrying debt load from student and consumer debt, and they are still making gifts to charities at very high levels or very important levels. So there's a generosity that's built into this generation, a responsibility. And this is something that churches should really understand and know about. Our Gen Z folks, our youngest ones that we're going to take a look at today, they're born in 1996 and later. And so this first statistic about them kind of blows me away, that by 20 years old, 30% of them have already made a donation to a nonprofit. At the age of 20, I was not making gifts to nonprofits. I don't know about you, but this is a remarkable thing for a generation to be able to say. Now, I think that's because institutions have made it really easy for people to make donations online. They can use their phone and give $5 to a political campaign or make a quick ask. They can do things sort of immediate through text message and through app-based mobile fundraising. But it's important to note that that message is being received by this generation. And 97% of them have made an online gift for a charitable purpose. That's huge. And that tells us a few things at church. First, that we absolutely must have a way for folks to make online gifts and to emphasize that program. And it tells us that when we ask in the right way, people will respond to that. 76% of people in this generation are worried about the environment and the planet, and they want to see that church is doing something about it. They are also the least likely generation to fill out pledge paperwork. Again, it's a debt contract in many ways, and they might feel that way about it. They've experienced and are experiencing debt. And so we need to think about pledge forms and how we ask them to make their commitments to the church and what goes into that. They also give online. They might not have or know where their checkbook is. And this is not a slam on them. It's just a way that they have grown up and know how to access their money and how to spend their money. They do it all, most of it online. And so church needs to think about it that way too. So millennials are the most churched group in the United States. Let that wash over you for a moment. This is from the 2023 Giving USA Key Findings Report. And it's important to note this because 10 years ago, our millennials defined the term none, N-O-N-E, when asked about their religious affiliation. 10 years later, they are the most churched group in the United States. 45% of millennials questioned say they attend church almost every week. Now look at that related to our Gen X and our boomer numbers. So who thought that the millennials were going to be the largest churched group in our country right now? We've been dismissing millennials to our detriment for more than a decade, and we need to really change that narrative in our churches and focus on them because they are raising families, they are showing up, and they are telling us that they are here in church. If these numbers don't reflect your church attendance, they don't reflect my church's attendance, I'll tell you that, then we are missing something in how we are messaging and how we are being attractive to our millennial folks and to our younger generations that follow them. Also, virtual services, not just a pandemic thing. It is easy for any of us to attend a virtual service, and millennials have told us that they like it, that they're finding community in it, that they're finding participation, and they're showing it by the frequency that they engage our online ministries. So if you were thinking about disbanding your AV team because you're only getting 2 or 3 people a week, don't yet. Think about it and think about it as a tool for how you make yourself attractive to our young members, because 30% of them are saying they're showing up to online services when they're offered. So let's talk now about strategies that we can take to become ready for our millennial and Gen Z members. And we're going to talk about how we engage their community and our neighbors in general. We're going to talk about how to increase volunteer engagement, because as I mentioned, volunteerism is the gateway for many of these younger generations to come to church. They will come and see how we save the world before they come and see how we do church and participate in worship. Let's talk a little bit about how we expect to raise funds from this group and these generations, and how we make disciples of them. The first and most important thing, I think, is that we show them results. Our Gen X, our Millennial, and our Gen Z donors are not motivated to give simply to maintain the status quo. That's to say they're not just interested in the institution for the institution's sake. They want to see that their money is going someplace that is making a difference. Giving, especially when they're raising families and they're paying off debt, and they might not be at the pinnacle of their earnings yet in their careers, giving is sacrificial. And we want to make them feel that their giving makes a difference. Every dollar that we raise goes to mission. We need to be telling them that message and showing them the results. This is to say that it is great if we talk about the food pantry that we have or the backpack donation program that we have. It's even more important to say how many people were fed this week, how many kids received back to school supplies, and what does that mean to them? Show them results, control that narrative, engage in storytelling, help them understand that connection between their time, talent, and treasure, and how that is meeting the needs of the world. Another way that we can keep our credibility with our Millennial and Gen Z members is to preach sermons that are honest. We're being told, and studies show, that they are paying attention to the sermons. They're not twiddling on their phones. They might be, but they're also listening. And we need to remind ourselves that that the messages and the way we message our gospel is really important. It's being heard and understand. They are hungry for thoughtful and provocative engagement on the gospel, and they want answers and questions to age-old problems. Churches that promise answers, quick and easy answers to complicated problems, are probably not appealing to our Millennial and Gen Z members because they understand the world as a very complicated place. They understand diversity of opinion and idea, and they see in our political discourse and in our media how black and white issues, how binary decisions aren't effective and aren't helpful for us. So we need to show that church wrestles with problems and it is a place to ask questions. So we should engage science in our sermons. We should engage the media. We should have commentary on what's going on without it becoming political and partisan, but so that it is deeply reflective of the values of our community. We need to engage the news. Many of us who are preachers, if we write sermons on Wednesdays and then, the weekend happens and something awful happens in the world and we have to throw out our sermon and start over on Saturday night, this is an important thing, that we don't just preach what the lectionary says, but that we make it relevant to what's going on in the world, and be ready to engage the headlines, the problems in our local community, issues that are coming forward, so that we don't feel detached. Our Millennial and our Gen Z members are very much integrated in what's going on in their world. And if church is a place that isn't, it feels like a disconnect. So relate today's gospel to today's living. We need to keep up in whole and healthy relationships as well. We're seeing that our Gen Z members and our Millennial members, they are living and working and going to school in places that have real integrity about diversity and inclusion. And so we want to make certain that those values are also reflected in our churches and how we are presenting and talking about the difficult questions of values and morality within our culture. We need to model some reality, not just sort of boilerplate answers, because that doesn't work for our youngest generation. It also didn't work on me either, by the way. We wring our hands in church about our architecture. And there's been a strange and perhaps alarming conversation, dialogue happening in churches for the past few decades about our architecture, our stone and our stained glass and our altar focused buildings. And people feel like, that's not what young people want. And maybe our architecture is doing us a disservice. Why aren't we meeting in more contemporary spaces that look and feel like community centers? And I'm just going to say that that's not playing out when we really look at studies. The Methodists have done some great work about this, and in particular, and so I've given you the study there in a URL that you can take a look at. But they've done a lot of research on how younger generations view church and the architecture of church, and it turns out that people like church to look like church. They gave this question and an answer to the people that they surveyed. Which of these altars is most appealing to you? Feels most like church, looks most like church, resonates with you. And so if you're surprised, perhaps that the one that looks perhaps like your church is the one that was the highest rated, don't be, because it's what they want. It's what our youngest generation says. They're coming to church for liturgy, for music, for the traditional look, because it's a place that makes them feel different and special, and it's a container for that care and love of a nurturing community. So we can see perhaps I would have thought that the one on the left, the one that only got 19%, was a favorite. It looks very stark and beautiful in its own way, but it doesn't rank as high as the sort of church with the big reredos and the cross at the front and the stained glass. So this is all to say, obviously, you're not going to change your architecture, but don't hide it either. Embrace it. Whatever your architecture is, find the way to make it work and appreciate the traditional value that goes into that, because a lot of our youngest members are attracted to that. Another thing that we need to do, especially as we've invited screens into our church post-pandemic, is to really be good at technology. Again, the Methodists have put together some great resources on this, and they actually have like a how-to sheet on how to make certain that your PowerPoint and your slides and your lighting and your music all match up together. The point here is that if your tech looks wonky, your youngest generation, who are tech natives, who see it in their classrooms, who see it in their social lives, who participate in tech all day long, perhaps even work in technology, they will see a disconnect between how well you try to use it and how it's performed. And it starts to feel, if it's out of sync, it starts to feel awkward. And that's a way that people might feel a barrier. So take a look at your tech, take a look at how you're interacting. And also this applies to your social media, right? A lot of our churches have Facebook pages or Instagram accounts. What are we doing with them? Are we really engaging? Or is it like, if you look at my own church's Facebook page for the past 2 years, it's just every Sunday's liturgy posted with nothing else, no like other things that we might want to post on our Facebook page. So we need to pay attention. If we're going to have social media, we need to pay attention to how we're using it, what's on it, what we're doing with it. Maybe ask some younger members to take over our content mediation and our Facebook and our social media, so that so that it matches with what we want to say. There's a question from Kathy about, is Facebook the right platform for younger people, or is Instagram or Snapchat? That's a great question, Kathy. And certainly Facebook has lost its luster with some of some of our youngest members. I think I think also it provides us the best place to have dialogue and content. Snapchat is really about, disappearing pictures and images that don't last. I don't know how churches might use that. Instagram is a great way, but it's very picture focused, right? So it's a good thing to show your outreach. We had 20 volunteers show up today. Here's a picture, and it shows there's life and vibrance in a community. So absolutely, Instagram is a good tool. Um, but I would look at those places where you can still have dialogue. Um, Facebook being one of them, uh, Twitter, now known as X, I think is problematic for lots of reasons, but it gives you a way that people can comment and share and add things. So pick your thing, maybe poll your youngest members. What are you guys using? How would you like to interact with us? We'll help you and they'll help you kind of determine which direction you should go, how you should invest in it. So that's a great question. We need to find the right tools and and have it be able to foster dialogue. Social media is meant for dialogue, not just broadcast. Web 1.0, those first websites that we created that were just posting things with no ability to interact, that period of time has come and gone. We're kind of on Web 3.0 now, and where we really need to say what is a way that people can interact with this and use this information. Great question. Thank you for asking it. Retention is our goal here. And what we want are for people to walk in and feel welcome. If you've ever done any of the work with Invite, Welcome, and Connect, which is a great program in the Episcopal Church that teaches us to be invitational. Invitation is so different from welcome because welcome is passive, invitation is active. We need to think about how we retain folks. Giving is one of those ways that we can create that discipline, but not just giving of finances. The expectation that your time and your talent are also expected of an institution is really important. These younger generations, as I said, appreciate the opportunity to volunteer. And so we should be creating, if we don't have them, we should be creating those ways that they can give of their time and their talent. And that will underscore how they interact with us, how often they want to come back, and how deeply they go into our community. We need to teach generosity as well. Generosity is our response to the gratitude we have for creation, and we need to keep drawing that line. We've been given so much. We've been given free will and ability to use all that we've been given and blessed with. And generosity is the way that we respond to that. We want to share our wealth and our works and our wisdom with our community, with our church, to make the world a better place. These messages underscore that ability that church is the place where we get those values and make those connections. Volunteerism also brings about emotional involvement. And this is really important because it engages people at their heart. They see work being done. They're a part of the solution, either in a big place or in their small community, in their very local or in their national way. They see the impact of their giving of time, talent, and treasure. And that creates an emotional connection, a spiritual connection, a desire to maintain a relationship with your church. So volunteerism is so important. A lot of us, and this happens in my own congregation, we say, well, we don't have things for people to do other than the things we've decided. We're having a potluck, we need people to show up for it. We're doing a Saturday workshop, we need people to show up for it. And so some intention needs to be made if we really want to get serious about our youngest members, to create the opportunities for volunteerism, to create opportunities where high school students that are looking for community service hours and engagement, or Boy Scout or Girl Scout troops, things like that, that are looking for community projects, have something to do at your church. What is it that you need? What is it that you could provide a few materials and invite a group in and they could run with an idea? Start finding these ways. It is work. It's work to create them, to fund them, and to oversee them. I understand that. And it's an open door into recruiting our youngest members into our churches. When they show up to do an event and they bring their friends with them and make connections, they might then want to see how we do on a Sunday and what that means to us. So before we start preaching to them, before we start inviting them to show up, before we start asking them to become a member, encourage them to volunteer and develop their relationship that way. It engages them in a different way. And then we can work on how we share the gospel, how we create that message, how we create the relationship with church and bring them to God through Christ. Discipleship is really important as well, as we think about it goes hand in hand with that emotional connection. Our discipleship, creating disciples out of people, adherents and followers and true believers, is about that deep connection with community. Those relationships of friends that feel like family, the relationship of commitment to church, that when I need church, it's going to be there for me. When church needs me, I'm going to be there for it. And how we create those relationships of giving of time, talent, and treasure, these make disciples out of us. And then we take the gospel and we become evangelists. We become people who want to share our good news with the world. Now, that might not look like it, take a friend to church days or those sorts of other invitational things that we might do. It could just be that we show our example by our love, by our living, and how we create relationships in the workplace, in school, that show, oh, I'm a Christian, I have a different value system that I'm operating from that's attractive to other people. They might want to learn how I do this, where I've learned this, what's formed me to be a part of this. Our churches are character factories in a lot of ways, where they can take us and they form us and they give us these values. We need to then think about it when we go out into the world and share those values with others. One-on-one relationships are really important. And as you see people standing on the edges of your church, maybe starting to take a step in, find a way to connect them with a mentor, with someone that they can identify with a particular ministry that interests them. That will help them form the kinds of relationships that make discipleship and coming back each week easier. Question asking is really important. And I said this earlier, that simple questions to complex, or simple answers to complex questions, doesn't fly with our youngest generations. And so we need to make question asking normative. It's not a threat. It is a welcoming thing to ask and to doubt even. It is said that doubt is not the opposite of faith. Rather, fear is the opposite of faith. So doubt is a perfectly normal thing. Make question asking normative. 11% of millennials say they don't believe in God. 32% say they're not sure if they believe in God. but they will ask questions. They want to know, like, well, why do you believe this? What does it matter to you? And your answer to why do you believe this is really important. They're paying attention to that. I heard a story from someone who was a camp counselor, and she developed a relationship with one of the kids who was there, who kept coming up to her and saying, do you really believe all this that you're talking about, all this kingdom of God stuff? Do you really believe it? Do you mean it? And she said, over time, she said, yes, I do. And here's why. And why are you asking this? What does it mean to you? Developing that question and having a sincere, authentic conversation with a young person about why we believe what we do or how we came to it is a really important part of our own journey. We need to be able to tell the story of our own faith and our own reason for being someplace, so that when people ask questions, we have some ways to answer it, which also then invite them to keep asking more questions and asking those questions of themselves. Diversity is really important to our youngest members. They are in school and workplace and communities that are diverse, and they themselves are a part of the most diverse generation that we've had in a very long time in our continent. 43% of Millennial and Gen Z are non-white. This is important for us to think about, as they are the future. And if we're looking at our very often white Episcopal churches, we're thinking about how to be welcoming, our leadership, our approach needs to start looking for diversity. Diversity into a organization that feels very white is hard to come by, because it needs to be intentional. It needs to be put forward. A lot of work and effort needs to go into who we hire and who we appeal to, and how we pick leadership in our church. And it's not just racial diversity, it's about identity, and it's about generational diversity. It's about idea diversity. Ask people who have different ideas to be a part of committees and leadership, so that they come in with new ideas. If we're just speaking in a bubble all the time, we're missing great opportunities. Raise up non-white leaders and seek, recruit, and hire for diversity in gender, identity, and ability. We need to be optimistic. Optimism attracts. 19% of millennials and Gen Z think that leaders can be trusted. 19%. That means 81% of them think they can't be trusted. That's a big number. And that's not just politicians and CEOs, that's also preachers, and that's parents, and that's teachers and other people in their lives. So if they're coming to church with that kind of skepticism, we need to show them how we are optimistic, how church is a different kind of place that bucks the trend of cynicism in our media, the doom spiral that they're focused on social media, and really starts to look at how church is an agent for change, and that we're optimistic. In fact, we are built on hope. That is everything about our mission, and our message is about that there is a better way to be. And we hope that we are doing what it takes to get there. Show that optimism, because it's integral in how we look at our own doctrine and theology. It's important in our history. And it was as true in the 2nd century as it is in the 21st century. Hope for the future and hope about what church can do for the world is our biggest value and asset, I think, that we can give. You can be a part of this place and change the world by doing it. That's a really attractive message to our Millennial and Gen Z members. We need to remember that the teachings about a new Jerusalem and a new world and doing a new thing are our history, and it's our policy as well. So we are creating and building and co-creating that new Jerusalem, that kingdom, that good place. We can't escape politics these days. They are all over, and they seep into our lives. But the obnoxious partisan national politics aren't helpful in our congregations. They split us. They are distant from what we're actually doing in our personal lives. And while they have great influence and impact on us as a whole, in our day-to-day lives, they're really just kind of background noise. So your church should be involved in politics. Church has always been involved in politics, but at the very local level. Issues, talk about what matters to your community, what your community cares about and what they're worried about and how they want to change the world. That's where we as church can use our numbers to show up, not just at protests and things like that, although those are great, but also at city council meetings, at school board meetings. And we should not be, we should give the voice of reason and values and faith that we believe as Episcopalians and Anglicans, that we bring goodness to the world, we bring intentional diversity of thought, we bring compromise and a middle way. We're not screaming at the extremes. We're preaching about how we really engage justice. And this is where we can make a real difference. It's in our local politics. So make certain that you don't ignore them, because Gen Z and millennial members can't ignore politics. It's so much a part of the daily life and also the daily anxiety that people feel that if church doesn't address it in some way, it's out of step. But find the way locally to make sense out of your own politics, your neighborhood, your town, your community, your state, and then find the ways to plug into it so that people can make a difference and share what they learn about the gospel in our civic engagement. We talked about this a little earlier, and this is about technology as well. Don't be Web 1.0 in a Web 2.0 world. Make sure that you have engagement. Make sure that you have dialogue when you're presenting information. We don't have all the answers. You have some of the answers too. So you're invited in with us. Learn about this. This is very attractive to our youngest members who are somewhat cynical of places that promise easy answers to difficult questions. Finally, let's make certain that people know how to give of their time, their talent, and their treasure. We have a group of digital natives that know how to use their phone or websites to make gifts, and that's what they're using to do their fundraising. They may not and probably won't fill out pledge forms. And so we, as treasurers, as finance committees, need to find the ways to be able to count those gifts and include them. I had a conversation with a young woman in my own congregation last year at stewardship time, and she was really worried. She came up to me and said, "I don't want to fill out a pledge form, but I will make a gift to church." And I said, "Well, that's fine. There are lots of ways to do it. Out of curiosity, why don't you want to fill out a pledge form?" And she said, I don't want to be indebted to church. And this would feel like a debt to me. I don't want that in my life. I want church to be something else. And while I don't think of a pledge form as a debt contract, I understood where she was coming from. And I think that this is reflective of this generation in many ways. So pledge forms, they might be on the way out in church. We might need to find other ways to build our budgets and count on gifts coming in and creating methods. So we're on notice that our millennial and Gen Z members are thinking differently about how they give. So if you don't have a way for them to give online, talk to me. We have some webinars on virtual giving. We have lots of information about it. Your diocese probably has ways and perhaps even a platform that you can use. We also have suggestions on what you can use at TENS. So online giving, absolutely essential. If you don't have it, let's find a way to get you on it. Mobile or app-based giving like Tithely or Vanco, Venmo, even if you have a congregation that established it, PayPal. These are all things you can do on your phone and make a gift to church. I have seen so many creative ways that churches do the offertory now, where they have a QR code, a quick read code in their bulletin. And so you can take out your phone and you can make a gift, goes directly to the website where you can complete your gift. So if you're a visitor, if I were a visitor in your congregation and the plate came by me, you wouldn't get anything out of me because I barely carry cash these days. I use my phone or my debit card for so much. So think about that when you are designing things. How might people make an online gift in your church? I've even seen one congregation put something sort of cheeky in their bulletin. We know you are using your phone during the sermon anyway, so why don't you use it to make a donation to your church, right? I mean, we can do this because people have access in their pockets to their phone. They can use it for a purpose. I've also seen congregations have like a little token or a laminated card in the pew where you can have a QR code and make your donation and then put that in the plate when it passes by. Some people miss the manual action of putting something in a plate and having it taken up to the altar and blessed. So by all means, if you're giving online, give people a token so that they can put it into the plate and feel like my gift is being blessed and accounted for, and it's a part of the offertory. It's not just zipping out of my bank account and into the church's account. There are also so many other ways that we can give direct payment from our bank accounts or through bill pay options with our banks. We can accept securities. This is especially important for people who are sitting on appreciated assets. They can avoid some capital gains taxes by making a gift of stock to their church. And that's one way that some people choose to pay off their pledge or make their gift annually to church. For folks who are living in retirement assets, they can make gifts directly from their IRA or from their other retirement accounts, or use qualified charitable distributions to do so. If your treasurer and your finance folks or your off-parish administrator don't know how to accept those gifts, call up your diocesan finance department and ask them, how can we do this? What happens? What do we need to do when somebody wants to give this way? Or through a donor advised fund or other ways that people make gifts to church these days. So there are lots of options. The more ways you offer people to make their gifts to church, the more adoption you will have in making lifelong givers to your church. Adopt as many ways as won't make you crazy. So have an online way, have a in-person way, have checks and cash, as many as your treasurer can kind of handle. Too many is too many because you get overwhelmed. If you have like 3 different platforms or something like that, it might be too many. But pick the methods and the ways that work for you and offer as much variety in the way you accept gifts as you can. This will really help you with our youngest members make their best gifts. I want to end before I open it up to your questions to talking about other things that TENS can do for you this year. We have our annual stewardship campaign materials. They will go up on the website in May, and you all have access to them. So please take a look. Our theme this year is Walk in Love. And so that will be the logo and the theme we use to create a comprehensive stewardship campaign. We also have a resource library absolutely filled with liturgical ideas, formation ideas, and practical best practices and tools to help you with running campaigns and forming your members theologically and spiritually around the discipline and the joy of giving and generosity. And we have frequent webinars. This is one of them, but we have lots more coming up and ways that you can engage. So please, please stay in touch with us. I'm going to stop sharing my screen for now and invite us back into the big room where we can talk and answer any questions that might have come up for you about our Millennial and Gen Z members and how we can make ourselves attractive to them. I've done enough talking for a while. It's all up to you now for a bit. Please raise your hand or come off mute and speak into the room. Hi, Chuck. Come off mute, please. There you go.
Finally.
You
mentioned that millennials, and I guess some of the other groups, question the integrity of institutions. They've heard about scandals and corruption and things like that, but you didn't mention the corruption or the scandals within the churches themselves. And that's a very big barrier for some of them, I would suspect. That not that it's there. I mean, you're going to have things like that in any organization, but if you gloss over it and pretend it doesn't exist, what are you doing? You're hiding it or something. And I think that it's important to, for instance, in the Episcopal Church, I know that there was a national treasurer who took a few $1 million before they were caught. And I suspect a lot of people in the Episcopal Church don't know much about that because it didn't make the papers a lot. So I think that's another factor that you didn't quite mention. You mentioned other organizations, but
yeah. Well, thanks, Chuck, for keeping us honest about that. I think it's absolutely right. Scandals, local and national, the church is not immune to that. And we need to address it. It's also a part of our whole and healthy relationships. Anyone paying attention to the lead up to this summer's general convention knows that there's going to be a lot of conversation about the Title IV process and the disciplinary process and sexual harassment in the church and things like that. We need to be able to talk about those things. 10 years ago, 20 years ago, it was about the culture wars and about churches disaffiliating and taking themselves out of communion and all that. We needed to be thinking and talking about that, and we do. So keeping ourselves honest, also really important. And so I appreciate that, Chuck. We're not immune to scandals. It's not just for the politicians and the CEOs. My friend Keith, I see your hand up. You're on mute. We still can't hear you.
Can you hear me?
Now.
Okay. Thank you for the information that you've shared. And I had a question for you, and this has to do with, are there particular subjects or topics that you have seen that millennials tend to have a stronger interest? And I would give examples of caring for creation and efforts around peace or themes around peace. Those are two that come to my mind. Are those things that would resonate from your experience, or maybe there are other areas you might see that they tend to connect with easily?
Thank you for that. And I think you're absolutely right that there are certain hot topic issues that church needs to engage. One of my slides reminded us that 76% of millennials and Gen Z care about the planet and what we're doing or not doing about it. And so if church is absent from that conversation, there's a big missing piece in our care of creation, for sure. Peace initiatives all over the planet and locally, you know, from gun violence to our foreign policy and war. People are very interested in that. We can't do much to impact foreign policy at the national level, but what can we do locally about our own communities? How can we show up? I think that's a big one. And I think, Keith, the other really important issue for our youngest members is income inequality and debt. Not just financial scandals that have kept them out of housing and investing, but how salaries are depressed or how inflation is keeping them from being able to participate fully in the economy, how they feel about that. I think that there's a lot, whether it's student debt, medical debt, or consumer debt that people are living with. And church has something to say about that. Some churches are paying off people's medical debt, for example, and people are giving money so that churches can participate in that and help people out. We can't all be quite that prophetic, but those make news when it happens, when a church pays off somebody's medical debt or something like that. Those are moments of real connection with humanity. And so there's a lot going on as our society right now about our perceived poverty and our real poverty, the working poor, wage gaps. There's a national and local conversation happening about minimum wage, about health benefits, who gets them and who doesn't. These are places where our youngest members are feeling a lot of pain, and where church should be a place where they can bring that and engage that. We can't point to verses about that necessarily, but we can provide that sounding board, that place of community where people can talk these issues through and feel that church is participating with them through that. So thank you for reminding us that there are some really important issues that youngest members need us to not ignore if
Thank you.
we're keeping them out of the conversation. Great question. Mike, please come off mute. I see your hand up.
Well, I think this might be more of a technical question, but if millennials and Gen Z prefer to give to specific causes, you're going to have a Sunday service where somebody is giving to the general fund as kind of their pledge, and somebody else who wants to give to, to the food bank or to medical debt or something like that. So in terms of the online giving platforms, some of them don't seem to have the ability to take anything other than into the general fund. And I'm wondering if you can just either point me to a URL or give me a list of names that these companies that will allow me to, split the money into various buckets.
That's a great question, Mike. Thank you for asking it. I have a couple of ideas. Maybe others of you are using platforms that are helpful in that. So here's my first response, that our church budgets should reflect everything that the church is doing in terms of inreach, outreach, and operations. This is a theological position that I hold. I think often when we separate our outreach into other funds rather than the operating fund, we're saying something about what that outreach means to us or how we hold those values. And I'm not trying to offend any one of us, because my own church does it sometimes too. We have special collections for special things. But I think in general, our ministries should come out of our operating fund, and we need to bring them in-house so that one fund is funding all of it, and that we think about it that way. Because when we think about restricting giving, then you have exactly what you've described. I only want my money to go to this fund versus that. And we start to disconnect. People need to fund the whole operation of the church. That said, there are particular occasions that we want people to be able to engage special kinds of fundraising. The flower fund or the mission trip for our teens, or we're doing a specific outreach for a homeless shelter, for example, or something like that. One of the tools that I've seen that is really great is Vanco. They allow you to have multiple campaigns within your operating budget, and you can identify, I want to make a gift to, here's my pledge, here's my flower fund, here's the mission trip, and you can make that all in one place, but you can identify. That's a great one, and we happen to be in partnership with Vanco, and if you go on our website, we can offer you a big discount, or Vanco can offer you a discount because of their partnership with us. And they have a really great way of doing that, making certain that we give to the operating fund, but also have some ways to separate out giving. There are other platforms that do that too. And if you look at our webinar on virtual giving, I can show you, it walks through some of the other platforms that are out there that do that work as well. But again, I just want to go back to the fact that our budgets need to be funded in full, and we don't want either in annual gifts or in special gifts, or especially not in endowments, for people to fund very specific ministries. We have a church in the Diocese of California that's struggling for its operating budget, but has a choral music program that is endowed in the millions. And that's great. They have beautiful music every Sunday that like 12 people are hearing. And so at some point, there was a big push, and this is how they did it. They don't have money for operations, but they have a great music program. I love music programs, but that was a real problem. It's become a problem for this congregation. So if we do too much specialization in our fundraising, we can miss the bigger picture of keeping the doors open and ministry funded and people being fed. So thanks for that question. I can go into detail, and if you email me, I'll have even more answers, Mike. Clayton, I see your hand up. Please come off mute.
Thanks so much, Davey. This has been a wonderful program. You gave us great information, and I know this is not specific to stewardship, but we're trying to move. I'm in a larger church for Episcopal churches. We're trying to promote this year, move into kind of a year-round stewardship program. Still have the November in gathering, but really stay more focused throughout the year. And you've given me some great information for youngers and millennials and all the generations. We're multi-generational. Any more specifics you could give about what that might look like and how to keep that in the forefront without looking like your hands in their pockets every week? Thank you.
Well, thank you, Clayton, for asking that. Year-round stewardship is about formation as much as it's about asking. The more that we tell the story of how your gifts impact your neighbors through ministry, we're showing that connection between giving and results without always asking people to give money. We're making the connection so that people understand that their gifts matter, and hopefully that results in people giving and continuing to get the message. We can't just do this at the annual meeting and then again in October, November when it's time for stewardship. If we haven't talked about that connection between gift and ministry and changing the world sometime in April or in July or at some other point, then we are not doing the kinds of formation that we need to do. So that's not to say that we're always shaking our members down for more gifts, but we're making the connection for them that every dollar goes to ministry. Narrative budgets are another way to do this, and TENS has a whole how to create a narrative budget. If you've never done a narrative budget, it takes your ministries and divides them into categories and spreads your fixed costs through them. So your children's ministry takes X amount of time from your clergy and X amount of your physical plant and your utilities and your insurance. And then you spread those costs across your children's program, your family, your newcomer ministry, your Sunday school, whatever it is.
That's a great idea. I had thought of that because people do not see, they just see a chunk in the
They
budget.
see a
and-
chunk.
yeah.
If all we're giving them is the line item budget, they
Mhm.
just see in every church, the largest item is clergy salaries and benefits, and then utilities and insurance, and then building maintenance.
Mhm.
If you look at those without seeing how they impact ministry,
Impact, yeah,
then you're just looking at them as huge expenses.
that's a great
They're
idea.
not expenses, they're ministry.
Mhm,
We need to draw that line always for our members. So I appreciate that. Year-round stewardship formation is really important. TENS, every Advent, we give a series of reflections that you can use at each liturgical season throughout the year. So in Advent, you'll get the whole package for next year's seasonal reflections. And you can use them at any point in that church season it's a 300-word theological reflection with some questions and answers. And you can use those as sort of adult ed pieces or sermon ideas, ways to pull in themes about the church year that we're moving through and stewardship. And again, it's not an ask, but it's just connecting those dots for people.
It's a reminder. Yeah.
It's a reminder. I preach a lot. I'm invited to preach in churches many Sundays, and I can almost always make a stewardship sermon out of any gospel, because at some point there's an ask about us and a result that's being shown. And whether it's a teaching or a miracle, or whether it's one of a lesson or a narrative, we learn from the gospel about what's being asked of us and how we can contribute to the world as Jesus invites us to be agents of change with him. And so I can always find that stewardship angle. And it's really important to do that. And I think someone who has his hand up right now, Charles Clowen, has something to say about stewardship sermons.
Well, I think not sermons, but I believe almost week by week, share with the congregation what the ministries are doing by their giving, not asking for money. But the 6 most important words are thank you, thank you, thank you. Because your giving made it possible to have a wonderful choir anthem today. Your giving makes it possible to have a wonderful church school here. Parents bring their children. Your giving makes sure they've got good equipment. It just works. Rooms are clean. You make that happen by your giving. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Altar Guild, wonderful. These women and men set the altar up, make everything right, perfect. Your giving makes it possible to have a wonderful equipment for them to do their job. I want to say thank you, thank you, thank you. All the different ministries, food bank. I want to thank you all because of your generosity. We have a wonderful food bank here that's caring for 200 people a week. Thank you, thank you, thank you for your generosity. Just that short thing. Now, I've given you like 5 stewardship sermons in about 2 minutes. But just connecting people's giving, thanking them for that giving, so that they have understanding their giving is really making a difference in people's lives.
Charles has literally written the book on 1-minute stewardship sermons, which you can find on Amazon, and I'll send a link when I send out the materials to this. You can always be talking about stewardship because there's always something to be grateful for. Thanks, Charles, for reminding us that gratitude and generosity are well connected. Before I take your question, Chuck, I see there are a couple things in the chat that have come up and I want to address them. Eileen asks, when you have no millennials active in your church, how do you start that generation's participation? Great point. So first of all, we need to have millennials and Gen Zs before we can get them to participate and be involved. Again, what your church is doing in the community is what will attract people who are looking for community engagement. And they might not say, I'm looking for a church. They might say, I'm looking for a way to give back. I'm looking for a way to connect with my community. I see people on my streets. I see people in my neighborhood who need help. Who's doing something to impact that, whether it's cleaning up the park or teaching kids after school or taking care of seniors and reaching out to them. Who's doing this work? And people have questions, and young people, as we pointed out, have a real hunger for community involvement. So they should see a church, and they could see a church as a place to begin volunteerism. It is a gateway into it. So how do you advertise? How do you promote your volunteerism and your giving? One is use your social media. We're doing an event in 3 Saturdays from now, and it's going to need this many people. And this is how you engage. Fill out this form, show up, no commitment needed, bring your gloves, whatever it is, and have people do it. Another way is that free circular newspaper that comes around once a month that's mostly filled with coupons. Those are run by community organizations. They are starving for content. If you send them a picture and 300 words about something your church is doing, has done, will be doing, it doesn't cost you anything because they are desperate. They don't pay journalists. They will run a story. And you don't have to be evangelizing in that. You can just say, we're doing this thing and this is why it means something to us. And we need volunteers, or we need ideas, or we need people to drop off buckets and mops, or whatever it is, to engage your community. Volunteerism is a way in. The other way is to just keep reminding people that what you do and what your members do is changing your world or impacting your community, and getting that message out there. Send your people out to school board meetings and community councils and neighborhood organizing meetings, not so that they can say, come to my church and be saved, but so they can say, participate in saving the world with me. This is what my church is doing. Here are ways you can engage. Give that message, and your millennial and your Gen Z members will hear it and they'll respond to it. If they're not already there, they will perhaps want to start in ones and in twos and in small groups until they build up your congregation. It's intentional work, no doubt about it. It's not low-hanging fruit either. It is intention and it is work, but it can be really beautiful. Thanks for that question, Eileen. Linda B reminds us that Project Resource, a great ministry of the College of Bishops, they have usually 2 sessions a year, a spring and a fall, where they have a 6-week course. It's usually on Sunday afternoons, virtual, or they do some in-person gathering as well now as well. Check them out. projectresource.org, I believe, is their website, and you can find out a lot about it's for team building. Send your stewardship team, walk away with a plan. They have a great thing. It's about $400, $500 to send a team there, but it's well worth it. So thank you, Linda, for mentioning that. And Jay Bott reminds us that the Freed Up app is a way to have group discussion, and that it's another way to have connection in an online app-based media. So thank you for that. Chuck, I saw your hand up earlier, so come on off mute and ask your question.
I don't have to ask it because you answered my question when you talked about how you get millennials, how you advertise. the projects for millennials to join to do. And thank you for that. That was helpful.
Thank you. Do we have any other questions? I know we're right at our time, but I'm always happy to take a last question if there is one. I want to thank you for spending part of your Saturday morning or afternoon with me and with TENS as we do this work together. I want to acknowledge that stewardship is intentional and it's hard work. I'm with you in it, shoulder to shoulder. I know that it's not easy, and I really appreciate that you are engaging this work and that you are helping your church in this way. We couldn't do church without you. Know that, and know that TENS has your back, and that we understand and are developing resources to help you. I am always a reference for you, and so I will send my contact information to you all if you don't already have it. It'll come out in the email that I send later today. Get in touch with me. I'm always happy to talk about stewardship, best practices, look at your materials, help you out in whatever way I can. This is such important work, and I'm really grateful for you all doing it with us. So thank you, thank you, thank you, to remind us that Charles's words, thank you, thank you. I appreciate all of your time and being with us. Blessings on your Saturday and on your work, and we'll be talking soon. Thank you, friends.